my name's Duncan Simpson. Um, I volunteer for the Switch Forum and I help by chairing the Education, Training and Competence group. And today, if you are hoping to see a talk on whether robotic waste picking is inevitable, then you're in the right place. Switch Forum was set up a number of years ago, and we brought together a number of key stakeholders in the industry in Scotland to highlight two key issues. One, the health and safety record of the industry, and the other one to highlight the education, training and competence opportunities that we have within the sector and how we can improve those pathways for learning and education. And the group has pulled together a number of assets, hopefully useful information from practical health and safety advice, highlighting issues that we should be concerned about in terms of health and safety in our day-to-day lives and in the working environment. And for those people we're responsible for, our employees and our customers. And we also, as I say, have been working with educational establishments, trainers, and other organizations to try to highlight opportunities for training, identify where the gaps are, identify any of the difficulties there are in terms of progressing your career within the resources and waste sector. And in the spirit of some of the events we put on, this obviously is one of them, a webinar, and
webinar.
all webinars are recorded and they're also posted onto the Switch Forum website. On the 4th of December this year, so if you could write that down, put it in your diary, we will be holding our AGM and winter seminar. It's kindly going to be hosted by Civil Training at their Blackridge HQ, and we're going to have speakers talking about the development of a young workforce. We're also going to be hopefully having Barry Wilkes from the Health and Safety Executive there talking about POPs WUDs. If you know what POPs WUDs means, you'll think, oh, that should be helpful, that should be interesting. But it's basically about the persistent organic pollutants that we have within waste domestic upholstered seating, and it's an important issue, and he's hopefully going to give an update on that. And then we're also going to have a speaker called Graham Martin, who's an ex-health and safety executive employee, and he's going to be talking about the enforcement that HSE carry out. And if you're ever caught or unfortunately become involved in a HSE investigation, the impact it can have on you, the sorts of things that you need to think about and how you can show leadership in that situation. I'd highlight as well that this year a number of organisations are coming together to hold a one-day event in Edinburgh called Resourcing Scotland. It will be on the 14th of November and it will be in the assembly rooms in Edinburgh and should be a very interesting day, a lot of audience participation, a lot of workshop output, and that output will be gathered into a white paper. So Switch Forum is always looking for support, always looking for help, always looking for ideas. If you think of another interesting webinar topic, you think there's something you'd like to talk about, then please contact us at the Switch Forum and we'll see what we can organise. But without further ado, I would like to introduce today's topic, which is about robotics. So when I was a boy, which was a long time ago, robotics and AI was probably what I'd be thinking about when I was watching Doctor Who or Star Wars. It was a thing that appeared to be just fantasy sci-fi. But now we can have robots vacuum our carpets while we're out. We can have robots assisting in complex surgeries to speed up the time of diagnosis and help us make more accurate decisions. We're certainly moving into the age of smart technology, and it's smart enough now that it can beat us at chess, even if we're a world champion. But as those machines and that type of software becomes more autonomous, we start to blur those lines between human and robot. And at one level, we get feelings of awe. It's incredible to see how far we've advanced and what this type of technology can do for us. But there's always a concern that are there other existential dreads that we need to think about in that area. So I think today's talk is to try to get us to forget about flying bin lorries and get us talking about talking fridges that will end up telling us what we should be cooking that day from the ingredients we have in our fridge and based on the mood that we're in. And that should lead to a more interesting and colourful world. And we're really lucky to have Nick Noble, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Danu Robotics. And Nick is a graduate of Glasgow School of Art, where he started a number of years ago. And he's managed to take that base of creativity and design and blend it with marketing, communications, and business development. And he's had an impressive career in this kind of digital technology, this kind of automated technology, where he was one of the pioneers in establishing digital radio. And his most recent work has been with Danu Robotics, where he's been supporting Amy Ma, who is the founder of Danu Robotics, and they've made great strides together in terms of developing this type of technology and the software that runs in the back of it, which is managing to give us great insights into the world of picking, sorting, productivity, efficiency, greater accuracy, and a whole number of other benefits that can come from this type of technology. So without further ado, I shall hand you over to Nick, just so that you're aware of the ground rules for today. If you could all just switch off your cameras, put your microphones on mute, and once Nick's gone part of the way through the slides, I'll start asking a few questions, hopefully not too difficult, otherwise Nick won't speak to me anymore. And then I will start to open up the floor to other questions. If you do have a question, can you pop your hand up or pop your question into the chat and I'll field that for you. If you're feeling brave, we'll get you to switch on your camera and ask the question directly, as long as you say who you are and where you're from. So without further ado, I shall disappear and I shall hand you over to Nick, who's going to tell you a bit about the work he's been involved in and some thoughts around some of the questions relevant to the Switch Forum. So thanks very much, Nick, and over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Duncan. I couldn't help but deviate straight away in response to your intro. Isn't it interesting how when people think about robots, they think about, you know, fridges that tell us what we should have for lunch, and yet when you talk about surgery, it's a very interesting point. This because if you thought about surgery from scratch, would you want something the size of, you know, a thimble going into you and operating on you, or would you want something this big? It's obvious, isn't it? I mean, if we're going to go into space, I'd rather send a robot into space than people. You know, hostile environments, tiny environments. That's where we need robots, not robots to tell me that I'm brushing my teeth wrong, or to tell me what I want for lunch. I think robotics is fascinating because it always comes, you know, the subject of, oh, the robots are going to take our jobs. And I'm also glad you mentioned the chess thing. I used to work for a Watson, the AI division of IBM, and there was a great story around Garry Kasparov, who was beaten at chess by IBM. And years later, he came up with this perfect line, and he said, "Humans and machines beat humans or machines every time." It's not a robot that's going to take your job. It's another guy with a robot that's going to take your job. It's another guy with a machine, a better machine, that's going to take your job, because that's called progress. And it's the same hundreds of years ago, you know, Luddites and threshing machines. It's just progress. Anyway, I've digressed already. Thank you for letting me talk. The premise I want to put over to you is that robotics is inevitable. If we could click to the next screen, this is we were at RWM show last week. This is the video that was on the big screen, behind us all running away, just to show you these are our robots. They're fundamentally different from any you might have seen, in that they're kind of like humans. They've got, one of our robots has 2 arms, and they have grippers. These are the first iteration, very basic grippers. They literally pick things out, and those grippers is the fundamental difference to us and everybody else, because ultimately we're kind of mimicking humans. We're small footprint, stand next to the conveyor, and our grippers pick things off. That's the sorting software that you can see is outlining product, all the material. But a gripper is like a hand. You can have small grippers for picking up vapes. You can have strong grippers for picking up bits of light construction. Some that pick up metal. At the moment, we're bottles and cans to enter the market. But the potential is for grippers to do everything. So the next slide, please. Yasmin. So I've only got kind of one slide. It's just going to run through why, what's the advantages of our robots. The fundamental one is cost. It costs about a third of our nearest competitor. They are fit for purpose. They are very singular minded. We haven't taken a Japanese robot and trained it to pick waste. We've built something that only picks waste. It's built just to do that. And that means it's really slimmed down. It's all built here, by the way, apart from a few components from China. But it hangs off a gantry, and it's a big arm, and it picks in a very small space off the gantry. And you get 2 on either side of the gantry. So it's kind of, a bit like a person, really. So it fits in the same space. But cost is fundamentally the number one issue, because we're not competing with the big NIR system and air jets, those massive machines that go at terrific speeds and they do massive amounts of volume. We're aiming to replace the human pickers for very good reasons. So we have to be the same. We have to look at the cost of human pickers against robotic pickers. So the next one, please. So the idea of retrofit is, so our robots fit into about 1 meter of space of a conveyor. It's about the same as a person. And it's designed that way because there's going to be a few years when people are retrofitting robots alongside humans. Obviously, that's a primary concern to this group. Robots working alongside humans has to be a safe environment. But retrofitting robots in, so you can see them working, you can see the improvements, and you can transition into more automation rather than rip and replace. So that synergy of human and machine working together is very much where we're aiming. Next one, please. As I say, grippers is the right solution for the future. That we're reproducing these things. Two fine pincers, 3-prong grippers for picking light industrial, soft grippers for picking delicate material. Grippers can pick a piece of wood or a vape or a nappy for a negative pick. They can potentially pick anything, and that's why it's the right solution. A vacuum system will never do that. A vacuum system is inherently limited in what it can pick. We're developing pickers, which is much harder to do because it's the right solution. So next one, please. Data. Data is such a huge issue. As with any industry that has a technological element, robots, the data is the DNA of robots. It identifies and it counts and it records picks. So it's counting what's on that conveyor belt. It's counting what it's picking already, whether you use that data or not. And as the technology in the robotics advances, that data is just going to get richer and richer and richer. We're going to be able to analyze what everybody is disposing, everything that's on that conveyor, where it came from, how often it turns up, what condition it is in. All of that, so that data feeds into what we used to call it is let the machines do the data, let the humans do the insight. Throw up the insights in what's happening. Are there anomalies? Are there issues? But very basically, we have the data. We just haven't been using it very much. Our industry is a very macro industry. We deal with tonnage in and tonnage out. Robotics can deal with the data of that individual object. Especially EPR is obviously a great environment for this to work. The next one, please. So modular, again, it's funny. Humans are modular. If you have too much capacity, you buy a few more humans. It's the same with robots. Because they're so small, you can just stack them up. So you start with a 2 robot and make sure it's working, and then you just start adding them up, and they actually work off each other. So you can have one brain running 8 robots and saying, right, you 2 pick plastic, you pick ferrous, you pick non-ferrous, you pick vapes, you pick negative picks, you do light industrial, and then if the flow changes, you swap them all around. And this one, if this one doesn't, well, there's a cluster of objects and it can only pick a few, then it can let the next one pick those ones. So that modularity is about flexibility as much as anything. Next one, please. The materials roadmap. We've started with bottles and cans. There are a number of companies who are coming to us and saying, you have to develop something for this. Mastic tubes for the reprocessors, that's a huge issue. Vapes, of course, being a health and safety forum meeting is a massive issue. All of these, we've got a running list of categories and material that we'll be able to pick. If there's one that jumps out, we'll just advance it. But ultimately, we want to get to a point where we can essentially replace sampling. If you could just, instead of having a dedicated shed where you take a ton of material, tip it out on a table, and a couple of people sift through it for a few hours, writing down on notes what they've found, you could have just a chute that diverts a bit of the conveyor, and a couple of robots take their time and pick everything into different chutes. Then all you're doing is recording the weight of those bins. That's it. That's how it should be. I don't understand why we would want to keep people doing just picking through rubbish and recording what's in there. So the automation of sampling, I think, is very much a target for us. That we can identify everything, and even if it's slowly, pick them all in separate bins. And then the final one, this is about our progress. So we've got 3 development partners, all in Scotland. 2 more down south who are looking at very interesting projects, which I might touch on. They're getting our first robots in January, and they're going to basically run them into the ground and try and break them and run them as fast as possible and get them as dirty as possible, and really road test them. So we're coming to a very exciting period for a very young company based in Edinburgh at the National Robotarium, which is all very exciting. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. I've got a few slides on something that we might touch on later if Don can ask the right question.
That's a good challenge. I'll see if I can work out what the right question is. But we start, if we could, Nick. I mean, that's, I'm fascinated by technology and data, but just from a general point of view, I mean, I look at robots and I doing this type of work, and I look at the comparison with humans and the health and safety challenges a human faces. Can we run through some of them? And I guess where I'm going here is, you don't know what's going to come across that belt. You're standing in an environment which is challenging to most humans. It's a repetitive task. You've mentioned vapes. We get sharps as well. So there's the danger of needle pricks and other bits and pieces. So there's obviously the positive angle of you remove the human from that environment, but at the same time you have a machine that's basically moving around. I presume you provide screening
Yeah.
Is there a noise issue? So could you discuss some of
Mm.
those issues, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's inherently a dangerous environment. You know, you've got big trucks, you've got fast-moving conveyors. That's probably the most dangerous thing that a person's going to come across. You know, heavy skips, chutes, compactors, shredders. I mean, you certainly wouldn't let a kid play there.
Yeah.
Um, it's inherently dangerous. So the more we can remove, our hands and arms from this big industrial, fast-moving kit, the better. That's
Hmm.
that's the that's the ultimate benefit. In
Hmm.
terms of our robots, no, they're not noisy. They're very, very quiet. They use very little energy, and essentially they're only picking and dropping. They're not. I mean, they're relatively lightweight. The most they can lift is 3 kilos. So I
Hmm.
suppose if you came into contact with a 3 kilo breeze block, it might hurt.
Yeah.
But if you're standing next to a conveyor belt of potentially dangerous objects, that's definitely the greater danger. But we do, yes, absolutely, it's behind a screen. The robots, it doesn't take. Again, this comes down to that space issue. They're contained within a small space because they
Yeah.
don't actually venture out. They just pick, front to back. That's why they're on opposite sides of the conveyor belt. So the picking area is contained, and as long as you can guard people from putting their hand into the machine,
Yeah.
um, then you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. And I mean that's an interesting point in its own right, that when you look at the cost of MRFs, one of the elements of a cost of a MRF is the distance of conveyors you need to put in to accommodate the sorting stations, whether that's machinery or whether that's humans. But fitting that technology into a smaller footprint has its advantages in terms of just reducing cost overall, I presume.
I mean, one of the inherent advantages of robots is that this is all they do. They are relentless. They are consistent. They are accurate. They don't do anything else. They can do this 24/7, 365 days a year. They don't get tired.
Mm.
They don't get bored. They don't get sleepy after lunch. They
Hmm.
work just effectively at 3 in the morning as 3 in the afternoon. They are consistent.
Yeah,
And
so
if you have the capacity to run your MRF, three shifts a day or 24 hours a day, then it makes absolute economic sense to use robots in place of humans.
and again, I guess what I take from that comment is that Karen, who I know is on the webinar from ROSPA, gave a really interesting talk on driving and fatigue and the dangers that that brings into that situation. Um, and I guess a human, if they're standing at a belt, picking, they're going to become fatigued, whether that's mental fatigue or physical fatigue or both. It means their level of accuracy is going to drop. Their potential for making a mistake is going to increase. And they're doing this day in, day out. So um, to me, there's more inherent danger within the human becoming fatigued over that period of time of a shift, and their
Yeah,
accuracy falling and their thought processes falling compared with a robot, for
yeah,
example.
yeah. One of the other companies I was mentoring at a tech accelerator where I met Amy from Danu, have a monitoring device that measures your cognitive performance over the day. So if you do
Okay.
have a couple of pints at lunchtime and go back to work and pick up a chainsaw,
Yeah.
it kind of sends an alert, say, yeah, maybe go and sift some sand instead.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
it's we all have our tired moments and we all have our moments of lack of concentration. I heard somebody told me that people get motion sickness as well, standing next to conveyor belts, and often can just keel over.
Yeah.
Told me that.
Yeah.
Oh, me.
And I guess that's because you're in an environment that can be noisy, can be dusty,
Mm,
and there's obviously the thought of bioaerosols and fibers and all sorts of other stuff that you might be breathing in. We've covered the sharps. Also, it's a repetitive motion that you might be doing, picking and throwing to one side. So in a way, I guess that robotics is kind of removing those risks, and what it's replacing them with is the risks that we're all aware of with machinery and equipment in terms of training people, ensuring the right signage is there so that people are aware not to be sticking their arm in there, but also screening. Um, it's a bit off piece, but in terms of what would be the maintenance regime for robots, how often do you have to check your equipment? How often do you have to fine tune it? Is it a lot, or is it a weekly process,
I mean,
or what's your
we'll find that
suggestion?
out. We'll definitely find that out from our development partners.
Yeah,
We're pretty sure we've made them robust enough and simple enough.
yeah,
But back to the data thing, that if some you're constantly monitoring how many picks they make, and every pick is guaranteed. It's not, if they drop something, it's not recorded as a pick, because
okay.
what happens is that the teeth pick something up and it records that it's got something between its teeth, and then it goes over to the bin, and before it drops it records that it's still got something between its teeth, and then it releases it. So it's a guaranteed
Okay.
pick. So
Yeah,
you're counting as you're going all the way, and it's real time data. So you'll be able to see if something's remotely. If you're down in London, you've got your 16 MRFs all working. You'll be able to get an alert that one robot's not picking enough very quickly.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so
So can I ask you, I know when we met a number of months ago, we had quite a long discussion about how do we come up with a number? How do we come up with a benchmark
mm,
comparison? Um, because most people in the industry like to sort of kick the wheels and poke and prod at a new bit of equipment and compare it to what they've got.
yeah,
Um, did you manage to make any progress in that
I think
area
so.
in
Yeah,
terms of?
and perhaps it helps being an outsider in the industry. I mean, one thing I was just thinking as we were watching this video, I bet everybody's sitting watching this video going, "Oh, it's very slow, isn't it?" It is in the video. It's because at the National Robotarium, we're not allowed to drill into the floor. So it's just kind of resting on a couple of breeze blocks. So it is running very slowly in that. It does
Yeah,
run a lot, so I promise you. Um, the and I mean the speed is obviously really important because you don't want a couple of robots to be slowing down the rest of the process. So
yeah,
it's the best use case we've had consistently is about quality control at the end of the line. After the big air jets have done their thing, then having our robots come in and do positive and negative picks on what's left on the conveyor belt, where it might be running a little bit slower. But in terms of metrics, that is the right question. In fact, so if you want to advance the Yasmin, if you could advance to that next slide. What I did was I did this for one of our clients who came up. There we go. Right, hold there. So he came up and he said, "Well, look, my good pickers, good being the operative word, they pick 45 picks a minute, and they're really cost effective." And I said, "Okay, I'll measure it. I'll do some analysis on that." So I did this. So we started off with, if you have an 8-hour shift, and obviously shifts can be different, take away lunch and a couple of tea breaks, you're talking 6.5 hours of solid picking work from one good picker in a shift. So that's 380 minutes. At 45 picks a minute, that's 17,500 picks a day. 5 shifts a week, 87.7 thousand picks a week. They work 48 weeks of the year. So basically, you've got 4.2 million picks from a good picker every year. So let's get that granular. Now he wanted to know that he could pay for this investment over 3 years. So let's have a 3-year period. So over 3 years, that good picker, presumably if they don't go off sick, is and turn up, is 12.6 million picks. So that's what you get for employing that good picker over 3 years. Now, the cost of that, if we think about it being a living wage, it's actually more than this when the total cost of the MRF, but let's average it at 28,000 living wage. Over 3 years, that's £84,000. So if you just divide those up, those between each other, you get a number of that you get 150 picks for every pound you spend. Now that's how I would analyze this in a in a granular way. I want to spend as much money and get as many picks as possible. Well, you get 150 for every pound you spend with a good picker. Now, if you look at one of our robots, which has 2 hands, so the same, you could run it three shifts a day, but let's be conservative and say two 8-hour shifts, and let's throw in some 30 minutes of maintenance, even though we don't think it'll need that every day. So that's 930 minutes of solid picking. At 30 picks a minute, which is what we're running at, so not as fast as a good picker, that's just short of 28,000 picks a day. 14 shifts a week because you can, it doesn't care. That's nearly 400,000, 52 weeks a year because it can. And over that same 3-year period, you have 61 million picks. Now the cost of our robots, one robot 60k, and then you've got the license fees, which pays for the maintenance and the service and the AI and the software. That's 18. So the total cost is 114,000. Well, that's already, whilst you're paying it back, 4 times more cost effective. You're getting 535 picks for every pound you spend. So it just makes sense from the day you put it in. But the real improvement is on year 4. So that 52 weeks a year, that's how many picks, and then you're just paying the license fee, which is the 18, which is the next click. There you go. So divide those up. So in year 4, you're getting 7 times more picks for every pound you spend. It makes total sense. And that's before we've even gone to 24/7 running.
Yeah, and I guess so there's 2 sides to this we'll kind of follow on from, if that's okay. So I think it's brilliant you've come up with these numbers, because you hardly ever see numbers like this when people talk about the product that they've made. But I guess the other issue is, and that's not a human being that you have to engage with, train, remain motivated, protect them from all of those other health and safety issues that we've said, do the recruitment process, hope that they turn up, and then disappear just as you've trained them, and then you have to find someone else. The robot will continue to be trained on a daily basis and turn up on a daily basis.
Yeah, and we all know that the cost of human labour has been going up steadily over quite rightly, in my view, over the last few years. Minimum wage, living wage. It's getting harder and harder to find anybody to do this job. The best quote I had was from 3 directors of a MRF down south. When I asked them about any HR issues, they all burst out laughing, and they said last year we did 400 new employee inductions to maintain 16 jobs. Yeah. And they put twice as many people on every shift because half of them don't turn up.
Yeah.
So I haven't included those kind of calculations in the.
No, but I think that kind of tells you something about the job. The job is not an easy job to do as a human being. It's a job. So can we then sort of seamlessly segue into, again, I don't think you and I are individuals who are saying it's great, we should get rid of every human being that's involved in a job and we should put a robot in because it's more robust and it's cheaper. What do we do with those humans? How do we so again, forgive me, I have a view that the AI and the software that I assume runs at the back of your technology is looking for data, and it's collecting data, and the AI then starts to look for patterns and trends and enhance and add value. But my belief is, and I'd be interested whether you agree with this or not, is the individuals that will add the color, the depth to that software will be the individuals that have been doing that job. So they will know in the winter time in the run up to Christmas or post Christmas, the mix of material on the belt might change like this, or they will be the ones that will first recognize that suddenly a company's brought Sunny Delight onto the marketplace, and the next minute you're getting more HDP cartons coming through the line than you ever had before. Um, it's those people that, in some respects, we could move to become the teacher and the enhancer of the software and the technology, as opposed to just saying, well, you're redundant, away you
Yeah.
go.
I mean, already I'm thinking, there'll be very competent people on those lines. The opportunity to monitor a team of robots, to be optimizing, to be maintaining, to be watching for anomalies, looking at the data that is being fed to them.
Mm-hmm.
Already, the manager of a robotic team sounds a much more interesting job than being a picker. But the everything when you put innovation into a process, you always get new opportunities. For
Yeah.
instance, our cost and footprint means you can put these robots in very different places. MRFs are massive. They're big industrial machines for very good reasons, because that's the scale of the processes that are within them. When you scale that right down, you can think very differently. So you could, for instance, put our picking and sorting robots into a shopping precinct
Mm-hmm.
and pick the food waste, the contamination, the packaging and the food
Mm-hmm.
almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking about micro MRFs, a MRF in a hospital, a MRF at an airport, a MRF
Mm-hmm.
in a shopping precinct. We all know, food waste. If you can separate the food from the packaging within an hour of it being thrown away, the yield is incredibly high. You
Mm-hmm.
stick it in the skip for 3 days, it's mush.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Mm-hmm.
common sense. So
Mm-hmm.
instantly we're actually creating opportunities for waste processing, waste disposal
Mm-hmm.
in new places. If you think of that micro MRF, if you think of a few robots picking across the whole mix, black bag mix included, then you can start putting MRFs into very small communities. I mean, we've got
Yeah.
a lot of those in Scotland that
Yeah.
just can't process their waste because it's uneconomic, and you're not even transporting the waste across the country.
Yeah. And I mean that's intriguing because a debate that continues now in the industry is that we probably believe that we can engage with a large chunk of the population, and humans are great pickers, sorters, and they do that at home for us, and they drop off material at bring sites for us. Um, but there are a group that are a bit misinformed, or they have picked up on, waste myths of, oh, they take everything we've separated and they just chuck it in the one container. So we should just not be very careful in what we do because it doesn't really matter. And then there are a number of individuals who have got more important things in life to worry about than, say, recycling. Um, but that causes a problem because that contamination um, reduces the value of the material that we're collecting, increases the difficulty of sorting at the back end because there's a wider mix of materials that are potentially hazardous or cause other problems. And there was a discussion between should we have dirty MRFs and should we have clean MRFs? And I'm not going to get into the detail of that, but all of those risks that we talked about in terms of airborne biohazards, sharps, just nasty material going through a dirty MRF increases all of that risk for humans, and therefore robots, if they can, pull an amount of value out from a residual stream, a litter stream, remove that, and potentially increase the capture rate of recyclables.
Yeah, and we look at this from a naturally from a human perspective and say we have all these sensors that robots just don't have. But then they have ones that we don't have. When I was at Cereco for their open day, David was showing me. He showed me two identical brown lasagna trays for takeaway
Hmm.
food. He said they're identical, aren't they? No, they're not. This one's polypropylene. This one's PET. All of a sudden, the industry has swapped. I can't even remember which way around it was. Has swapped from one material to another type of material.
Yeah.
We can't detect that, but there is technology that can.
Yeah.
There's technology that can find a chlorine signature in a certain type of plastic. And he had to override. He was saying, I had to override the pickers. Say, trust the machinery. If the machinery tells you it's PET, put it in the PET.
Yeah.
So
And I
robots
guess
will.
that's intriguing as well from, as I say, if you kind of go back to this idea of software, um, the looking at the waste going over the belt. Um, a number of years ago, we would never have heard of vapes. You know, there was a discussion about stopping smoking and chewing gum and patches and various bits and pieces. And then suddenly out of nowhere, vapes appeared. And then disposable vapes came very quickly off the back of that. But as an industry, we were blindsided by that marketing trend that came out and the growth of that product. But I'm sure that we started seeing these things in MRFs in the early days, but we'd only have seen a handful. But the technology, in a way, would probably be more observant of that type of anomaly going through the system. Would that be correct?
Yes, yeah. There's a number of companies doing with sensors that pick up, the tiny electrical signals or traces of lithium, and then match that with a certain shape that we can feed in, and you've got
Yeah.
a perfect fit, and we've got the fingers to pick it out.
Okay. So can I ask you, just coming out into that, so I think we're agreeing, we take the humans and we remove them from this problematic situation and we put them into an upskilled area of adding value through the insights they get from managing the new technology and potentially teaching the software at the back.
Mm.
How well do you think our education training system is in Scotland, the UK, around this area of technology, and especially with a focus on resources and waste? What more should we be doing?
Yeah. Okay, that bit I have an opinion on, because I'm not qualified to answer the first kind of question of how well we're doing training people.
Mm.
But there are certainly, I've worked in many types of industry, always in technology and design and marketing, and some that should be very interesting, like drinks and computer games. But this actually is probably more interesting because this matters. The whole circular economy, sustainability, the climate change, the ocean, the islands of plastic waste in the South Pacific. This really matters, and it matters to the future of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
That alone, and then you add in, there are like the eco park at Glenfarg, the Ben Green
Yeah.
Eco. They're going to get some robots in, but they've also got the energy from waste plant there. They're producing hydrogen, and of course they've got the solar panel farm and the wind energy and all the waste processing and the aggregate processing. When you pull that all together and see how we process waste in the broadest description, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I hope we can make that link between education and places like the eco park. I think a lot of people would be inspired to
Mm-hmm.
know that we're actually doing something about this.
Yeah.
And so I certainly think a bit more of that.
Yeah. I think that kind of goes back, Nick, to if you said to your average school leaver or someone looking for a change of career, when you think of the resources and waste industry, what do you think of? And they think of the individual at the back of the bin lorry emptying the bin. They don't think of a robotics engineer. They don't think of an AI software technologist. They don't think of communications expert putting across the case for this type of technology. They don't think of the engineer that designed the system or maintains the system. So I think it's easier for me to say, because that's part of what the industry I come from is. We need to get better at telling young people the opportunities that exist within our sector. And much as I'd like to see all waste disappear to a waste-free world, I think it's going to be there for a while more. And at the same time, we need to work out how to deal with the new products, the new materials, the new challenges that come forward over time that we'll create as a population. So I'm going to stop there for a second and ask, I know there's a number of people on the webinar. I'll give an opportunity. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask Nick directly? If you do, you can pop your hand up, or if you're shy, you can type it into the chat. Anyone got a question they want to ask? Or are you all feeling shy this morning? Are you frightened that we'll get an AI to respond to you? If not, then I can keep moving forward with that. Have you, and I guess it's, oh, here we go. So there is a question. Just give me 2 seconds. Wow, they're all coming through now. Hang on. Let me catch up on the questions. So Emily Nichols is asking, how do the robots do with picking flexible plastics? I presume you mean like domestic films, potentially.
Film, I'd imagine, yes, film. We haven't trained it on film yet, but the idea that actually grippers are much better at picking film than vacuums would. I mean, film clogs back vacuums all the time. It's a constant problem. So yes, the robots can absolutely pick the film. If you're thinking about where you put the robots, say you put the robots at the end of the line to pick through the remnants, there's probably not a lot of film left unless it's stuck to something like a nappy, in which case we can definitely pick it.
Okay.
We're expert at picking nappies. And any anomalies like that, even a can with a crisp packet stuck in it, or anything that's combined waste, dirty waste, grippers are inherently adept at doing that. We just haven't trained them yet.
Okay. So hopefully that answers the question, Emily. Is that okay, or is there anything else you want to ask as a follow-on? And Karen McDonald, who I mentioned earlier, she was basically saying it's a fascinating subject and welcomes the data insights, and probably look forward to seeing more data insights as this equipment machinery is put out in more places.
Actually, it was worth mentioning that the role, SEPA's role in all of this, because I would hope we can work really closely with SEPA on developing, for instance, automated sampling. They've got to have faith that our machine is identifying every single piece of rubbish from that, or at least at least the percentage of other is in single figures or whatever. So they've got to be confident that we can do it. But the moment they can set some parameters and some guidelines and some requirements, the sooner we can get automated sampling into MRFs. It just makes such economic sense to have a machine doing this 24/7 than hiring people, and who would want to do that job anyway.
Yeah, and I guess it takes you to that place where I won't out any of the older people on the webinar, but a number of us have been involved from our early days in doing compositional analysis, waste analysis, and it's always seen as a a kind of initiation into the industry. It's where you learn exactly what's in the bin, the volumes it comes in, the way it looks, the way it behaves, what those fractions are. And many of the models that have been built come off the back of these compositional analysis, trying to predict market development opportunities, trying to predict trends. And it's not the most pleasant of jobs to do. And it inherently is flawed because it costs a lot of money to do. And you're basically picking a semi-detached from a certain socioeconomic area at one point in the year. It doesn't reflect the whole year, yet we'll generate a forecast off the back of that analysis. And I'm assuming that on the basis of we've been talking about that MRF code of practice, the DMR part of sampling, though we could probably do commingled sampling, it would be intriguing as well if we could look at it in terms of just doing that refuse analysis, because it would tell you what's left in the bin. It would tell you what materials are there, what we're missing, but on a continuous flow basis, potentially in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you have to at some point invest in the technology that's going to give you the best benefit in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Wind turbines being a classic example. You know, they were horrendously expensive at the start, and now it's the cheapest form of energy generation on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
When you invest in robots and you're getting that real-time data from all different types of waste,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to really see anomalies. You know, you cross-reference data. This is going right back to Watson AI. You know,
Yeah.
the insights that a deep thinking AI will come up with, you know, about, for instance, different areas, the waste coming off from different areas at different times of the year, or
Yeah.
you know, in the dry waste and the dirty waste. You know, the cross-reference data that gives you insights into the way society and communities are working. We haven't even seen anything like that yet. We're still dealing in, tons out, and data that might be, you know, months old. And
Yeah.
we need Alistair on this subject, don't we? He's the master on this subject.
Yes, I mean, certainly Alistair, I know his organization, they do a lot of compositional analysis, but again, I can see from my background in producer responsibility, or the EPR that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, they're collecting data at the front end. If you think about companies like Polytag, with the smart tagging, these companies are digitally tagging pieces of packaging. And I mean, I'm aware of a company that was putting a static signature into plastic polymer so that we could track IT equipment. So it's not that far off to say Scotland looks at a charge on disposable beverage containers. Most people go into a coffee shop. If they take a disposable cup, they don't often consume it within the shop. They take it with them either to their car or to a litter bin, hopefully, or drop it at a collection point for those types of cups. But it's not that far away to think you could track where that individual bought that coffee cup and where it ended up, and ultimately where it ended up being recycled. Which at the moment, the only way we'd pick up that data is either through compositional analysis or doing interviews with people, which are inherently flawed, because when you say, do you use a disposable cup? Most people go, oh, no. I use a reusable cup. Or they want to appear to better, but it's not that far from all these digital traces, all these pathways joining up. And it's much harder for humans to join up that information because it's just overwhelming.
And we don't see the insights yet. We don't see the anomalies. AI sees the anomalies. You know, back at Watson, we had some fantastic stories about, you know, one of my favorite was Watson was called in to help national guards help protect rhinoceroses in parks, and they were tracking the rhinoceroses, and the AI actually flagged up an insight, said, stop tracking the rhinoceros, track the antelope.
Mm-hmm.
Because when a poacher turns up The rhinoceros doesn't care. He's got,
hmm
a ton of armor. The antelope scatter.
hmm
So that's your signal. And it was the AI that, when it cross-referenced all this data, it said, track that. That'll tell you when the poacher's around, and then you can
hmm
alert the guys.
hmm hmm
It's
hmm
only that's what AI is good at, crunching
Yeah.
billions of lines of data and showing you anomalies
hmm
that you understand. You might see 20 of them, and not many make sense, but one is it's outstanding.
Yeah. And again, kind of to come full circle, it would be my belief within that if you have a switched on picker, even, the engineers that are based within the MRFs that are there to try to resolve any issues on the efficient operation of the plant, their awareness of what does that stream of material normally look like? How does it change? What products and materials should we be seeing? They're exactly the type of people to then look at that information and say, does that make sense? Is that real? Is this something that we could enhance the operations of this facility with? And to me, that's where the interest in the job, the learning in the job and the development in the job going forward should come from. So John Crummy is saying, excellent presentation. This tech will eliminate picking and associated hazards for staff and who can be better employed elsewhere on site. So it's kind of backing up what we've been saying. So have you, Nick, looked at, you've obviously mentioned picking from a stream where you might remove packaging from a food waste stream, or we've talked about the removal of DMR elements in a MRF, so whether that's bottles and cans or any other material. Can you see this being in WEEE areas, or sorting scrap materials, or where else do you see this benefit coming from?
WEEE is a little bit more challenging because from what I've seen from all the specialists, is that a small consumer electronics, that you have to pull them apart to get to the components. So it's a much more complicated job. So I think that's a way down the line.
Yeah.
If a circuit board was the unit that you were trying to pick and it was coming down the conveyor belt, of course we could pick it. But somebody had to dismantle the product first.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think is definitely further down the line. Light industrial, absolutely. I mean, our grippers can pick a bit of 2x4 that weighs 3 kilos. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
It'll probably knock all the else of the rubbish off the conveyor, but it can do it.
So you could program it to positively pick the fractions that might come through a skip operation, for example, a commercial mode.
If you can identify it, that's the first thing. If you can see it, so you're talking multiple sensors, cameras at different angles, an AI that will pull all that data together and understand it and say, I know exactly what that is. Arm 3, you pick that and put it in that bin. And then yes, light industrial, absolutely. I mean, obviously there are companies doing this with very large grippers, big industrial stuff. And we've spoken to a few MRFs in Scotland about this. We're probably a way off that. We can physically do it, but operationally it's a bit tricky at the moment.
Yeah, okay. But I guess that's no different from most of the MRFs I've been to will say we have these two individuals at the front end that pick out large contamination. Then it goes up through a number of mechanical processes that spread the waste out, take out another, fines. Then there is an automated picking process of one type or other, which might be robots, but it might be the larger equipment, the sensors and everything else, and air jets. And then you might have another station of humans looking to spread stuff out, remove, pull apart the encapsulated materials. So it feels like you basically say we can replace with this part this type of robot, this part, this type of robot, because that's the job they're best at doing.
Yeah, the big, NIR, air jet, machines from the likes of Tomra. They're fantastic. They run
Yeah, they
extremely
are.
fast and
Yeah,
are do huge volumes. In fact, we've been at two MRFs recently where they've made the kind of £1 million investments in all this equipment, but they're having to run them having to run the conveyors a bit slower to get the yield.
yeah,
When in fact, if they just stuck a couple of our arms at the end to get the remnants, they could run those big £1 million machines at full tilt and get the maximum benefit out of them. So
yeah.
it
Okay.
doesn't matter if the yield went down from 97 to 95% because we'll pick it up later.
Yeah,
And we're absolutely right at, our robots can do negative picks of all the nappies and stuff like that, can do contaminated positive picks like the can with the crisp packet stuck to it, and all the things that the air jets missed.
yeah,
And these robots cost £60,000. That cost £1 million.
yeah,
You want to run that first of all. You want to run that as fast as possible, as
yeah,
often as possible, and
yeah,
that after all is what humans at the beginning of the line are there for, is
yeah,
to take out the anomalies so that the Tomras can run at full tilt. So
yeah.
that's why we're not competing with them. We never will. We're
No, no.
competing with that certainly at the moment at the end of the line.
Yeah, and where you can
It's
enhance and
quality control.
improve. It reminds me of a long time ago now. I visited one of the first clean up and three color glass separation plants in France, which was a really impressive setup, and it had that type of over belt, really clever technology using air jets and optical sensors to identify the colors of glass or contamination. But um, the general manager showing me around said there's a constant battle between whenever the quality manager is out, the productivity manager turns up the speed of the belt, and whenever he comes back from lunch and the other one disappears, the quality manager turns the speed of the belt down. And it's that battle of how much material can you push through the MRF. But the key thing is how much are you capturing and what's the quality of the material that you're capturing. And I guess above and beyond that, um, it's a safer place, a more less risk environment. Plus, it's not just a piece of capital equipment you're running down over time. It's a facility that you're enhancing over time to get a greater capture at the back end for the front end investment.
Yeah, yeah.
So, anyone else got any questions you want to ask? I know Nick and I could probably keep going at this for a good time, but we don't want to bore you to death at the same time. We want to make sure we're talking about the things that you want to hear about.
Well, while you're typing, I've got a train story.
Okay.
My cousin was the chief engineer on Eurostar for many years, and obviously a train buff. And
Mm-hmm.
he once told me about. He said the demise of the steam train in the 50s wasn't down to better technology coming along in the form of a diesel at all. Diesels were
Mm-hmm.
rubbish in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It was because people post-war, nobody wanted to do the job of cleaning out boilers, climbing
No.
into boilers, scrubbing them down. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody wants to do that. You have to pay more and more, and it's harder to find bumps. Like that sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
It's the people that change the industry. The people
Yeah.
that will force the MRFs to look at robotics. Just
Yeah.
as the British Rail ended up adopting diesels because it had to, because it didn't get the people.
So kind of on that basis then, Nick, if you put this is where we are now, where do you see this in the future? Specifically around, resources and waste. Where do you see this going?
I think there's always going to be a place for the really big MRFs running masses of volume 24/7, near major conurbations. But I think we'll be, processing the waste nearer to the point of disposal. Like I said, the
Mm-hmm.
hospitals, the shopping
Mm-hmm.
malls, the
Hmm.
the airports especially. They
Hmm.
produce massive amounts of waste. Most of it goes into landfill.
Hmm.
Let the waste industry becoming more sophisticated and us
Yeah.
processing more of the materials. If you have robots that run 24/7 that can pick every single type of material, then those niche materials, like vapes, for instance, it's economically viable to do.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, that's the immediate future, I think.
Hmm. And that's really intriguing in its own right. That area of kind of on the go, where the individual is confused as to where the facilities are to drop material off. Most of us would prefer to see something go in a litter bin than on the ground or in a field. Um, but it's an inherently difficult area because of that mix of contamination that comes into play. And I think we can manage an amount through EPR sort of regimes where you say if you make this sort of thing and it ends up there, there'll be a penalty fee against you for doing it. And we can have litter fines, but we know that they're very hard to put in place and actually um, get that to make a difference. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's very hard to prosecute people for dropping litter. But if the cost of the technology and the accuracy of the technology increases over time, it does give you an opportunity to start to tackle some of the problems in those streams. Um, and I think generally people seeing that would think, God, that's not an individual with a brush and a shovel piling stuff into the back of a cart, which they push down the street. That's a different world that we're kind of moving to then.
Yeah.
Um, Anyone got any other questions? I see Emily is typing away. I shall wait and watch these dots dance around for a while and see if there's a question that's going to come through. Um, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to pick on audience members, but I'm not afraid of doing that either. But I mean, what are other people's feelings about this type of technology? What you've seen today, where you see it going in the future? Do any of you have an opinion on that? That you're not frightened to share? I think everyone's feeling shy today. They must have got up, looked out the window and thought that is awful day compared to yesterday. But I'll tune in and see what's happening here. So tell me again, you mentioned the machines are manufactured predominantly in the UK, in Scotland, or just the
Yes,
UK?
yes. So we're at the National Robotarium, which is on the Heriot Watt campus,
Yeah,
which is a fantastic building. But we're going to be moving to production unit in Edinburgh to pull together the machines so we can actually start delivering them next year and get our development partners
yeah.
working with.
So Emily's question is, they're interested in the potential role of R&D funding for testing new ways of working, new material types, use in new contexts. Could R&D funding be improved to support innovation and demos on this type of topic? So, I mean, I definitely have an opinion there, but
Yeah, I think you have to answer that one. I'm not qualified to answer that one.
yeah, so my view would be that there is funding available for AI advancement from the likes of UKRI. There are other funding opportunities that we could look for. They're very time-consuming forms to fill in. They're very competitive processes. But my opinion is this is an area that we need to focus down. The industry needs to fight to say, look, there's more opportunities for enhancement of this type of technology through funding in this area, and we should do more of it, rather than us having to take another grant and try and bend it to what we want to do in the
Yeah,
sector. So I would like to see more of it.
here's a thought. There is. I was just thinking of Robin and David at Soreco, who are they're part of the were part of Fife Council, weren't they? And
Yeah, the arm's length organization set up by
that's the one.
Fife to deliver their
Yeah.
collection services.
Now, David especially is one of the most inspirational people in this industry. His grasp of the way how to optimize MRFs is fabulous, and all absolutely grounded in data. But that organization have a remit to be innovative. The way they're funded facilitates innovation. They want to be better because it
Yeah,
not only serves that organization, but the money goes back to Fife Council. I
yeah,
think that as a structure is worth investing in more.
yeah.
I think
And
that's
I
been
would, yeah, I would agree with that. I would basically say, even if you looked at it from a point of view of, my guess would be that not far away, coming over the hill, will be, as part of the circular economy bill, potentially targets coming in place. And that Resource in Scotland conference, one of the workshop sessions will be, what should those targets be? Should they be for everyone? Should they be for certain materials? Should we measure it in tons? Should we measure it in carbon? All that is up for discussion on the day. But whether you're in a local authority or whether you're in a private company or whether you're in a social enterprise, I would argue you should be looking to get more material benefit out, whether that's in pounds or whether that's in environmental benefit, from picking more things and getting them to go around the system more often, which is circular economy. And David is intriguing because, as I say, he's got a big setup within that Soreco MRF, but he's constantly trying to enhance the output value of that plant. So I guess my short answer would be, we could get better at organizing ourselves to try to access funding that's available. But I also think it would be good for trade associations, professional bodies to argue more for funding to be available specifically in this sector to enhance these sorts of things, but also, um, from where we've started with Switch Forum, remove health and safety issues, remove occupational health issues, remove issues to do with mental health, well-being, job satisfaction, and also within the R&D. So Karen has really kindly pointed out that her colleague, Dr. Bob Rajan, has written a practical guide to AI in occupational safety and health, which she's offering to provide a PDF copy of on the basis of, she lets him know that she's going to share it, and if he agrees, then it will be available on Amazon from the end of this week. So Karen, if you can check with him that that's okay, we'd love to take you up on that offer. And obviously, if we can, we would hold the information on our website. And I see John is connecting with you as well to try to get a copy of that document emailed directly to him. So you'll be horrified to know, Nick, that that's us with about 15 minutes to go. So does anyone have any final thoughts, any final questions, anything that they would like to ask before Nick and I sort of round up today's discussion? I have one comment, which was, without taking the mystique of today's webinar away, you asked me if I could give you a kind of hint as to what type of questions you might get asked. And I sat for an hour and I wrote down 10 questions in my notebook based on my kind of knowledge and experience in the industry. And I remembered kind of this time last year, I chaired a session at Scottish Resources on data and technology. And I finished that off at the end by saying I could see it not far off that next year you'll be at a conference and it'll be a chat GPT asking 3 robots questions and they'll be answering all of these questions for us. And I came home, and because I'm nosy, and I decided to put in to chat GPT the question that you asked me. and then compare its output with my questions. And I would say there was about an 80% overlap of the questions were exactly the same, which thrilled me in the fact that the technology could do that in about 10 seconds, and totally depressed me that I thought that's my 30 years of experience down the Swanee in one go.
Yeah.
But
It's
that
interesting, isn't it?
negativity didn't stay long, because I thought, no, that's not true, because there's
Yeah.
someone at the front end teaching that machine to do that.
But I've also seen a cartoon of a marketer having a very short, pithy statement, feeding it into Chat GPT that expands it into a whole article and a podcast and everything. And then somebody at the other end taking that whole podcast and feeding it into Chat GPT to reduce it down to a pithy comment. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, thank you very much for your time. I find this a fascinating area. From the comments, I think people are finding it a fascinating area. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you to Amy as well for allowing us access to the information that helps people form their opinion of a material, a new product, a service, but also that context of health, safety, education, training, competence, research and development. I know it takes time to put this together and not necessarily any benefit, but I think it's been a really helpful discussion to have. And if there are any follow-up questions that people have, is there a way they can get a hold of you? I take it would be okay for us to pass people your contact details.
Yeah, or Dana Robotics website. There's a form there if that's the last way
Okay.
to find me.
Perfect. So all that I need to do is to say thank you again for your time and for the presentation. It's fascinating. Everyone else, if you find that helpful, you'll find a copy of the webinar once Yaz has enhanced it, taken my aimless chat at the front end of it away, and put the core details onto the website at Switch Forum. Remember, put that date in your diary for the AGM. If any of you have a subject area that you think we should cover, if you think there's something that you would be happy to talk about, you can see it's a friendly environment. We'll work with you to get you through the webinar and the presentation, and you're all great at what you do anyway. Please come forward to us and put forward your proposals. But beyond that, I just have to say thank you very much for joining the webinar today. Thank you very much for your continued support of Switch Forum, and I look forward to seeing you either online or in person at some point during the future. But thank you very much again for your time, and look forward to seeing you in the future. And thank you, Nick. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much, Clyde. Excellent. Thanks very much.
Thank you.